Welcome, advocates, to another episode of the Leading Equity Podcast, a podcast that focuses on supporting educators with the tools and resources necessary to ensure equity at their schools. Today's special guest is Dr. Karida Brown. So without further ado, Karida, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, it is a pleasure to be here.
I'm a history teacher by trade, so I'm excited for today's conversation. I got excited when I saw you got W.E.B. Du Bois behind you. I'm a big fan. I've read The Souls of Black Folks a few times, one of my favorite books. I learned a lot about HBCUs and just about the education history behind our educational system in the United States. So I'm jumping the gun. Let me get back on track. I want to give you an opportunity to share a little bit about yourself, what you currently do.
Okay. Hey, y'all. I am Dr. Karida Brown. I'm an author of 6 books, most recently, The Battle for the Black Mind. I'm an oral historian, but at my very core and foundation, I am an educator. I'm a professor of sociology at Emory University, where I have had the pleasure of teaching over 1,500 undergraduate and graduate students.
Awesome. So you have 6 books. I didn't know you was doing it like that.
I be slinging books, y'all.
So tell us, I'm curious now, what are some of the other books that you have out?
So you see the painting of W.E.B. Du Bois behind you. I actually co-authored the text in my discipline, The Sociology of W.E.B. Du Bois. And that has been one of my shining achievements. Also co-produced with the fine artist, Charlie Palmer, the new Brownies book, A Love Letter to Black Families. That book last year won the NAACP Image Award for Outstanding Literature. Those are a couple of my works. I won't bore you with the rest of them, but Amazon, you can look them up.
I didn't know I was speaking to somebody of your status, so I was just okay. Well, you got me excited now. I'm ready to get into the topic. And again, thank you for sharing a little bit about yourself. And I'm going to definitely pick up some of those books because again, I'm a history teacher, and so I love that kind of. So I'm excited to learn more. But let's get into today's topic because I am a product of historically Black college university, Oakwood University. Shout out to Oakwood University out in Huntsville, Alabama.
I know that's right.
So I was excited for today's topic and going back to W.E.B. Du Bois' work, and I read Souls of Black Folks, and he talks about HBCUs, the origins, and kind of why they were initially set up. And I remember reading about the agricultural and mechanical, the A&Ms. And so there's a lot of HBCUs that have that A&M behind it. But I would love for you to start off with kind of sharing some of the research that you have in regards to why HBCUs were founded.
Let's go back, and I just want you to imagine context, the educational landscape of the U.S., especially in the South, right after the Civil War. Right after the Civil War, there were no public schools throughout the South for Black or white children. So this idea of education as a universal right for all American citizens wasn't a thing. We also have during that time, after the very short-lived Reconstruction era, the Jim Crow era comes in that requires separate and unequal institutions. Black institutions over here, white institutions over there. And it doesn't matter that everyone's paying into the same tax base. The landscape is already split. So that's already creating a seed of inequity. But when you think about like the why, the purpose of HBCUs, it's because of this structural inequality and the need for higher educational institutions for African Americans, for newly freed Black people, and their progeny, right? So you see this dogged pursuit of education amongst African Americans during the early periods of post-emancipation. Why? Because it was illegal for African Americans to even learn to read or write during slavery. So if we believe that knowledge is power, Black folks understood that education had to be a part of their freedom dreams. It had to be a part of like their long vision towards liberation. So you saw in a very short period of time, Black folks not only getting K through 12 education, not just getting what was available to them at the primary levels, but seeking out college opportunities. And you're right to mention that there was a variety of HBCUs from the gate. You had A&M schools and A&T schools, which really focused on agriculture, trades, work that you would do with your hands, skilled labor. Okay, but you also had schools that were founded on liberal education models, some schools that were founded just to focus on health. Emory University focusing on producing generations of Black doctors and dentists. That and everything in the middle. We had it all when it came to the range of HBCU institutions. Now, fun fact about the origin story of HBCUs in this country, they didn't start in the South. In fact, we have our earliest HBCUs predating Southern institutions by like 30, 40 years, popping up in the Midwest and the Northeast, in places like Pennsylvania with Lincoln University, places like Ohio and what have you. But the lion's share of HBCUs were established in the South. Why? Because of Jim Crow.
Thank you for sharing that, and I'm glad. I had forgotten about A&T as well. I just know about A&Ms. That came to mind, and I remember reading somewhere. I don't know if it was Souls of Black Folks, but it was somewhere where they were talking about, again, it was illegal for Black folks to read at that time, and again, considering context, they were just emancipated, so a lot of generations, that's all they knew was agricultural and mechanical. And so they felt like, well, this is a skill set they already know. So let's just create these institutions of higher learning to hone in on those skills, essentially tracking them, if you will, to be able to continue on to be sharecroppers or farmers and things like that. If that was my understanding, you brought in the liberal arts side of things as well. So am I close to some of the origin stories?
You are, but what you're also doing is like hitting the nail on the head of the crux of the beef around Black education, a beef that's really like embodied by W.E.B. Du Bois and Booker T. Washington, whereas Booker T. Washington is, known for many, many things. Okay, he was a powerhouse, a Black Titan, I'll say, of the 20th century. But he was a Black leader, president of an HBCU, Tuskegee Institute. This school and Booker T. Washington himself championed the idea of industrial education for Black Americans. Okay, I'm going to break down what that meant. And then you have folks on W.E.B. Du Bois's side he's also a graduate of an HBCU, Fisk University, the first African American to earn a PhD from Harvard, and goes on to also become a Black Titan. He very much got behind the idea of liberal education for African Americans. So what was the big divide in this beef? Because we should be able to have all of it, right? It really came down to ideology. When you say industrial education, I want to remind you that this is not the same thing as we would think about as like vocational school today or getting a tech degree. No, this was a model of education, a curricula that was designed only for Black Americans. And it was to pick up, to your point, to pick up on those skills that African Americans had developed for worse or for worse during slavery in agriculture and domestic service. So the industrial education model was built on a curricula of teaching Black folks to do more of that, okay, at the expense of civil rights, at the expense of enfranchisement, at the expense of access to residential equality, at the expense of the right to sit as a juror of your peers in court. So in the industrial model of education was also the idea, the philosophy that Black folks really didn't need to be focusing themselves on full citizenship. The focus should be narrow on building wealth based on the skills that we already had. I want to ask you this question because this gets to the Du Bois beef.
Okay.
For people, okay, who had 250 years at least of practice of doing farming and domestic service for free, do you think that we needed more college to teach us how to do that?
No. And I think that's why Du Bois was and Booker T just didn't see eye to eye. My understanding was that Du Bois did not come from an enslaved household, and Booker T did. And so Booker T was familiar with the life of enslavement. And so he was pushing more or less, we already know this thing, let's keep going that direction. And Du Bois was, well, he had never been part of the slavery, had never been enslaved. And so he was looking at it from a different perspective as far as the place of where Black people should be in regards to, I guess, society.
My aunties used to have this saying, "You don't believe that fat meat is greasy."
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
And I think that's a great way to tease out this nuance and this distinction
Mhm.
that you're making that's very important. While W.E.B. Du Bois, to his credit, was a like phenomenal genius visionary. He really saw a future not only for Black people, but all Black and brown folks and oppressed and poor folks, a world where we all could be well, free, liberated. He was working towards those aims. And because of that, many of his ideals were super lofty, including the fact that he grew up in Barrington, Massachusetts. He did not grow up in a Jim Crow context. He certainly did not grow up on a plantation. His ideas of racial violence and racial terror were, in many cases, through proxy, through reading about them. He actually never visited the South until he was sent to Fisk University for college. So that's a different socialization. And why I go back to what my auntie Nim used to say, "You don't believe fat meat is greasy." Booker T. Washington understood the extent of white racial violence that was available to every African American person, especially in the South. He grew up on a plantation. He didn't have a last name until he was 10 years old. Okay. He watched all manner of violence, not only towards him and his family, but other Black people on the plantation, and then experienced emancipation, experienced that transition of what it felt like to walk into your freedom, literally. Like he and his family, he as a little boy, alongside his mother and siblings, walked 400 miles from the plantation he grew up on in Virginia to West Virginia, where they started their lives as free people and had to put it all together, still within a context of the threat of violence at any point towards their livelihood. So Booker T. Washington, of course, had different constraints on his ideas around freedom and what role education would play in the long freedom struggle for African Americans, what role institutions like Tuskegee and other HBCUs should play. And his mindset was, you know what, we've got skills. So instead of doing all this talking, let's get down to it and hone those skills and have a monopoly. If we are to develop a monopoly around agriculture, we will control the United States food system. And that's where he saw, the potential and power as an economic engine for Black Americans. So these are important ideologies to tease out, whereas Du Bois is like, are we citizens or not? Because if we're citizens, give me all my citizenship right now. And you don't wait for power to give you permission to have access to freedom, because it's never going to come. So these battles that are symbolized between Washington and Du Bois are battles that folks, especially in the Black community, are still having today. I dare say that was what Kendrick and Drake's beef was about. Is it going to be capitalism that gets us where we need to go? Or is it a different liberatory model that's based on something else, right?
Oof. Okay. Now, so okay, and I'm glad that you're bringing in that perspective, and I want to go back to your initial question about, did Black folks need a institution of higher learning to help them learn the skills that they already had? No, I don't think they did. So I'm curious, where were you going with that question? As far as, I agree. So is there something underlining that we need to talk about?
That question is really a provocation, because in my time, I've given a lot of talks around the country and had a lot of discourse with folks around, this very issue, because it's important to how we think about the aims of education today. Okay. And folks have a lot of feelings about Booker T. Washington is an American hero.
Yeah.
W.E.B. Du Bois is an American hero. So a lot of feelings come out when you bring these things up. So why I asked the question in that way is I'm trying to tease out the core of the industrial education model not as a school choice, but as an ideology.
Choice.
I'm pushing us all to think about what are the ideological aims, what are the underlying philosophies that undergird our curricula, that
Mm,
undergird our schools. And that puts you on a different trajectory of how you're thinking through the purpose of these institutions. Do I think African Americans and all students should have access to all forms of education, whether it be trade school, whether it be agricultural, A&M models, A&T models? Absolutely. But I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the ideology that comes along with that. The idea that Black people should be trained to do, but not think, should
mm,
be trained to do, but not be able to participate as citizens in this country to the fullest extent of the law. That's the
mm,
question. Are you okay with the idea that money alone, capital alone, will be enough to get a people who have been marginalized, excluded, and oppressed to where they need to go?
mm,
Because even if African American, let's play the game. If African Americans went the Booker T. Washington path all the way, did create this economic monopoly around the agricultural system. Okay. What stops white Southerners from coming and just stealing all your money out of the bank when you can't go to court and it's illegal for a Black person to sue a white person over a contract in a court of law? When you can't vote for legislation that is going to protect your rights as a business person? When you have no recourse when somebody decides to steal your plantation and string you up on a tree and take your life if you resist, and there's no accountability for that? So these questions of what pathway to take with these different models of education were really questions about what does it mean to be a citizen for
mm.
African Americans. That's what this is about. That's
It's
what HBCUs are about. Yeah.
it's deeper. It's there's so much context that you just explained. Let's fast forward because
Yeah.
I'm curious now because and thank you for sharing about this. And folks, her book it has there's Dr. Brown's book is not just about HBCUs. It's a portion within her book. Matter of fact, why don't you share a little bit more as far as what the book is about as we progress in this conversation?
Sure. The Battle for the Black Mind is a book that tells the history of Black education from emancipation to Brown versus Board of Education. But it's more than a history, it is a playbook and a call to action because it really is putting out the blueprint of how a people in these United States fought against a system that was designed to not only create an educational experience that was separate but unequal and designed to be inferior. But that's not what African Americans got. They ended up striving and thriving and building institutions and curricula that really catapulted generations of African Americans from everywhere to Pullman porters, doctors, all the way up to our first Black president in these United States. So it's this story of striving and freedom dreams through education. So I tell the stories of Black educators, especially Black women, who founded schools, private schools, during the Jim Crow era in the South. And these institutions lasted for at least 50 years or more. And I tell you the blueprint and the playbook of how they did it. Now, today we're in a context where our education system is under attack in very different ways, but with the active dismantling or erosion of the Department of Education, with the very difficult situation that librarians, archivists, teachers find themselves in, including
Mhm.
myself, we are on the front lines of a new kind of battle around education. And this book reminds us that we've been here before in this country. There is a lot of hope and actions that we can take in our everyday lives to continue to deliver nourishing education to all of our students in the way that they deserve.
Definitely sounds like a book that I would love to read. So, folks, make sure that you check the links in the show notes to grab yourself a copy. All right, you mentioned some of the women that have founded colleges. The only one I could think of is Mary McLeod
Yes.
Bethune Cookman School. Is some more that are mentioned? I'm forgetting.
Yes, so she's the one that she's actually has a main chapter in the book.
Okay, okay. She got her own chapter. Okay.
Yeah, for for founding what stands today as
Mhm.
Bethune-Cookman College. But that school started off in 1904 as the Daytona
Yep.
Industrial School for
Yep.
Negro Girls. It
Yep.
was an elementary school for little Black
Mhm.
girls. And the demand was so great. Now, this was a private school. She
Yeah.
raised every dollar that went into that institution. Okay. It went from being an all girls school to co ed. It went from being an elementary school to spanning from kindergarten all the way up to high school. She then was audacious enough to believe that she could build a nursing school and a hospital on that campus, and did. Okay.
And did.
And did raise that money. Wrote to Andrew Carnegie, who
Uh-huh.
helped endow that, and in the 1920s ended up transitioning the school into a HBCU, which is today Bethune-Cookman College, which is still nourishing Black minds, which is still graduating Black, brown, and everybody else, everybody in between, students to go out into the world and continue to make it a better place. Institutions like these start off of radical political imagination. They start from radical freedom dreams. I'm sure she didn't think in 1904, when she was just starting out, she had $2 in her pocket. That's what she started her school with, $2. I'm sure she didn't know how this story was going to end. And I mean, and it's still going today, but it's a reminder to all of us, when you have a vision, it's not your job to know exactly what the outcome is to be. It's your job to get up every day and take that next step. Keep going, keep contributing to it. We are all small acts, and small acts fall big trees. That's the lesson.
Okay. Yeah, she got her own chapter. That's what's up then. Okay. So there's a lot of I wanted to fast forward because I know we could spend a lot of time on who's funding. You mentioned Carnegie family. There's other folks where, and I know Booker T, obviously, Tuskegee, very influential. You got George Washington Carver out there and all these different things. I had the opportunity to visit. I was trying to figure out which school I wanted to go to. And I remember visiting Tuskegee.
Yeah.
Almost went there. It just was in the middle of nowhere in my mind at that time, like 19, 20 years old.
Really? I love Alabama, and I love where Tuskegee is located because it's so close to Atlanta.
Yeah.
It's got its own community, Tuskegee, but
I love the campus. It just the location for me. There wasn't a lot around it, and so I passed on it. But it was a very that would have been the school if I hadn't gone to Oakwood. That would have been the school. That was my second choice.
So when I was applying to college, I got into Spelman.
Okay.
And that was my first choice, but I let my dad talk me out of it because he was afraid of me going away too far. I grew up in New York. He wanted me a little closer to home, but said it was my choice. So I ended up going to Temple. And because of that, I missed out on my HBCU experience. And I've always regretted that. Okay. So the way I kind of repatriated that for myself a little bit, in 2021, I spent a year as the inaugural director of the John Lewis Center for Social Justice at Fisk University.
Nice.
And there, perhaps I never am going to get my HBCU student experience, but I was a professor at not only an HBCU, but the one that W.E.B. Du Bois went to.
Yes. Okay, cool. Well, congrats on that. John Lewis obviously is a very influential individual as well. So I mean, just that's an honor itself. So congrats on that.
Thank you.
So there's a lot of talk, and I hate this conversation. I kind of want to know your take on this because there's a conversation. Well, why do we still need HBCUs? We should get rid of them. It's separate. Brown versus Board is over. Like separate. Why do we still need HBCUs? They're not as good as our PWIs. We need like all these different conversations that are here. We should just close down these schools, and y'all should just join us. I'm just curious. I see your face. I'm just curious. What is your take on that conversation as far as why do HBCUs still exist?
I mean, first off, can we have something? And I'm joking here, but I'm not. The real question is, why did we need HBCUs in the first place? The fact of the matter is that Black Americans never asked to be racially segregated. That was a mandate that was imposed on them by the white South. This was law. So the origin story of HBCUs that we talked about in the beginning of this podcast really point to the reason d'etre of HBCUs. They're born out of segregationist, supremacist systems. Okay. It is also important to note that most HBCUs were founded and first led by white folks, African Americans. So these are also, again, white visions for Black education. African Americans over the decades have reclaimed these institutions and transformed them into for us, by us, and about us institutions. They have to stay open today for many reasons. Number one, because they are historical and cultural heirlooms, Americans specifically, but to American history writ large. So they are important to the fabric of the American educational system. HBCUs hold a lot of history that is not replicable. They are institutions that go beyond what they deliver on a curricula. They have some of the largest holdings of African American fine art in the world. Why? Because white museums and galleries would not show those works. So for the most part, the endowment of the history of Black art are at these institutions. And the same can be said for music. The same can be said for historical archival papers. So these institutions hold a specific purpose and function in that way. And also today, HBCUs graduate more Black professionals, white collar professionals, than any other genre of higher education institution across the country. I'm talking Black doctors, Black engineers, Black astrophysicists,
Educators.
Educators, beans, greens, potatoes, tomatoes, and everything in between, including our first Black woman vice president is an HBCU grad. Okay, these aren't coincidences. These institutions have the muscle memory of and are equipped uniquely to socialize not only technical skill, but also character and a ethos of uplift and mission and service. So there's that aspect of HBCUs that you're just not going to get anywhere else. And the truth of the matter is there are only 101 HBCUs that are in existence today.
That's it? I thought there was like 117-ish.
101.
Like 5 years ago when I was looking into the stats. So we're at 101?
101, and there are approximately 4,000 colleges and universities total in the United States. What you focusing on in 101 for? What is that 101 taking from you? If you don't like it, go somewhere else. But in the landscape of college and university choices across the country, HBCUs are a very small genre of these institutions. They serve a purpose and a function. They are historical artifacts of this country. They are not replaceable. They are not anachronistic. They are not beyond their purpose. They serve an important purpose today. And there are not enough of them for all Black folks to go to. Okay. Yeah. So it's not like HBCUs are the only choice for Black Americans. And let me be clear, y'all who are out there listening, today, HBCUs are not restricted to just Black folks. HBCU, I'm sure you had this experience on campus too, are ethnically and racially heterogeneous institutions by the student body and by the faculty. Yep. Okay. So for example, Atlanta University, which is one of the South's oldest HBCUs. Okay. Atlanta University, which is today Clark Atlanta University, got its state funding revoked. Why? Because they admitted white and Black students. They didn't separate them in the cafeteria.
They did not separate them?
No. So you would walk onto Atlanta University's campus and see Black students and white students having public discourse together, eating together, learning together, thinking together. For the most part, these white students were the children of the faculty, okay, because it was also a mixed race faculty. And the state of Georgia was so against that they revoked the institution's funding. Okay, so I just want to remind us that these are not racially exclusionary institutions like PWIs have been for most of their histories. They're open to everybody, but they're made to especially attend to the specific needs of African Americans who have had a unique and not like any other experience in these United States. It calls for some attention.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head, and I'm glad you added the piece that we're not exclusive, like only Black people can come
Oh,
to this institution. I know there's at least Lincoln. If you go on campus, you wouldn't even know it was a HBCU
yes,
because of the
yes,
student demographics.
exactly.
So,
And that's
okay,
okay. And that's also a feature of historically Black American culture. It's a very welcoming culture, and the
yeah,
institutions reflect that.
yeah,
You
okay.
can come to the cookout at a HBCU.
I love that. I talk sometimes about, so a little bit about me. Karida, is I was in Idaho, so my kids, I have two kids. They grew up primarily in Idaho, and I was worried about like the experience because I wanted them to send them to college. And I tell my daughter, she's 15 now. I'm like, "Baby girl, you gotta get at least your undergrad. Just get your undergrad in the
Yeah,
HBC." And she's like, it's a whole world that she just doesn't really know about.
right.
But I'm like, there's so many different HBCUs that would match, and you can still find your community, if you will, just based off of where you grew up or whatever, just the things that you're interested in. You don't have to be full on militant or whatever. Like
Oh,
there's different genres or flavors of Black people. You're going to find your family. So this is a really good, refreshing conversation, Karida.
yeah. And that's what I love about HBCUs. It also gives Black folks, Black American from the Black diaspora, or Black
Mhm,
folks from continental Africa, it gives us all the
mhm,
opportunity to really experience the heterogeneity of Blackness and to
mhm.
remind us not to flatten ourselves as a
Yeah.
peoples. And I'm putting the S on peoples, that we are different. We have different political views. We have different cultures. We have different ideas of what it means to be yourself. So like it's important for us to be able to have the opportunity to contend with that. Because I can tell you the way I grew up in Long Island, New York, I had a very homogenous idea of what it meant to be Black, right? And it was important for me to experience and learn from and with and share with Black folks from the Caribbean and Black folks from Africa and Black Brazilians and Black folks who grew up in different religious contexts and Black folks who were super wealthy and Black folks. You just get to see this amazing range, and you come to the conclusion at the end of that experience, the very real truth that we are all, in fact, human.
At the end of the day. Karita, I've learned a lot. I have enjoyed this conversation.
Thank
I'd
you.
love for you to share with our listeners any final words of advice that you want to provide.
I just want to say a big shout out to all my fellow educators who are out there listening. We're going through a very difficult time right now, each and every one of us in different ways. And I just want to remind you that democracy is something that we do on a daily basis. We can't take it for granted that it's just going to passively exist for us. And we educators are on the front lines of democracy. So that has been the truth from the past. We now are the ones carrying the baton. So keep going, keep showing up. You are making a difference, and together we will continue to be the change that we want to see.
Hey, all right. Karita, if we have some folks that want to connect with you, what's the best way to reach you online?
You can find me at Dr. Karida Brown on LinkedIn, Instagram, or TikTok. I'm a little ratchet on my TikToks, but to that, go there. But if you want to hear me be more professional, go to my LinkedIn. I'm very active there.
Will do. And links in the show notes. Remind us, what's the name of your book again?
It's called The Battle for the Black Mind. It is out at all stores, online and independent bookstores. So get you one of these. It's a book that I wrote for all of us.
Yeah, absolutely. And links in the show notes. Dr. Karita Brown is here. Thank you so much for your time. It's truly been a pleasure.
Thank you.